All right, welcome to another exciting episode of Peanuts from the
Woo!
Plebs. Happy Independence Day,
Happy
everyone.
Independence Day.
However you
Are
celebrate
you
it.
really independent?
However you celebrate your independence or your aspiration there too. So what are we going to start with this week? How about Ghislaine or Ghislaine or whatever, however you pronounce her name?
It's actually Ghislaine.
Ghislaine.
So apparently
I'm going to intentionally mispronounce it.
I was going to say...
You're going to call her Ghislaine?
I'm going to call her Ghislaine because I just like that.
I was going to say happy Ghislaine non-Independence Day.
All right, so what are we placing on the betting odds as to how long she's going to be alive?
Well, the question is not that.
I know that's very dark.
How is she going to die? It's going to be suicide, accident. You know, I mean, there's different methods.
Is she going to see trial? Is she going to see trial? That's the question.
Well, see, so it depends on to what extent this is all just one gigantic cover-up. If she's actually, a lot of people speculate she was actually Epstein's handler. Like, you know, she has ties going back to Mossad. Is that right?
Through her father,
as well as her father. So I think a lot of people just speculate this is like just a big game. She never intended to use all that, you know, photos and video that were taken at the mansion on the island against people, except for the benefit of people, say Israel, you know, for political. So it could just be a big game, and they just like say, oh, the statute of limitations have run out. Oh, we got to let her go. It's really unfortunate. I mean, I don't know. I kind
of have that feeling that it's all just for show as well.
Right.
I don't think that it's an authentic. I don't believe it. I mean, and I really love how on The Rising, Sagar said, like, I want cameras on herself.
Yeah. I mean,
24 hours a day.
These victims went to the FBI in the 90s, and they were part of the original cover-up. They treated these girls like dirt. They said they were prostitutes, and they said the victims say they felt re-victimized by the FBI, and you know, I just think they are part of the problem more than the solution.
Well, like expecting the FBI to like solve this is like expecting Robert Mueller to, you know, expose Trump or something. I mean, the Democratic left, for lack of a better word, the Democratic establishment. I mean, they put their faith in, like, I mean, now it's John Bolton, right? John Bolton's going to reveal all this stuff about Trump. I mean, come on. I mean, these people are pathological liars. All of a sudden they're going to change and you're going to believe what they say. I mean, so the FBI is as an institution, can you really trust?
Well, you can trust you can trust them if you're in power and they're protecting you. Then you really can trust them. That's been seen, and that's the thing. That's what they see. Their loyalty is to, you know, the oligarchy and all that. It's not.
And what about the ties?
It's not to justice.
What about the CIA ties also to Epstein and Ghislaine?
What are the CIA ties?
Well, supposedly that's who they were working with, and that's why. What's his name?
It made the deal originally.
Acosta.
Acosta, yes, there we go. Acosta, yes, him. So
yeah, I just don't. I mean, there might be a power play that Trump might be involved. There's pictures of him like at Mar-a-Lago with Epstein. There's not any pictures of like him on the plane. He didn't come up on the roster for who was on the Lolita Express. There's never been anybody say he's been on the island. I mean, he's a dirty player, and he's probably, you know, guilty of many, many things. And he may be involved in the power plays going on with this, but I don't think he's as caught as Bill Clinton or Prince Andrew or Ehud Barak or who's the New Mexico governor Richardson and all these people.
But remember, according to that conversation with Whitney Webb and Maria Farmer, she said that Ivanka Trump was really good friends with Ghislaine, and that they were always together. So there is some sort, and I mean, she alluded to that they were working togetger, but I mean, I didn't hear too many details about that.
And there was a point that I think their mansions in Palm Beach were like a couple blocks away from each other or something. Trump and Epstein. So yeah, hey, it would not surprise me at all. I think people get to a certain level, and the little people are are pawns that can be manipulated and used however you want.
There are two ways this could go. I think, if you're naive and you think, oh, the FBI is going to bring all these people to justice and they're going to put her on trial and she's going to spill the beans on everyone. Okay, that's one way it could theoretically go, and that's what the naive person on the street may believe. But on the other hand, it may be like, oh, we have Ghislaine, whatever, Maxwell. Now we can work out a deal, right? So we could use her to get Trump. If she has anything on Trump, then that would be right before the election. I mean, 6 weeks before the election, come out with some stuff with some pictures and some video or some audio or whatever, that they could use that against Trump, right? Or they could use it, or they could find someone like, maybe they'll go after Les Wexner or somebody like that, who's like 80 something.
Or maybe somehow Prince Andrew, who's got diplomatic immunity, is cornered. He just spills his guts because he doesn't seem like he's a very stable person.
I mean, they want to just like put this back into the box, and so they have to give people something, so they can say, okay, we accomplished something. We arrested her. She's going to get some kind of a sentence, and then when this all dies down, she'll get released after like a few years or whatever of in a country club prison, right? So I mean.
Yeah,
I think that's.
They're already talking about the original deal that Epstein did, like gave her some cover, as well as they're talking about a lot of the cases. They're talking about statute of limitations. They're talking about jurisdictions, where the stuff happened and where they can prosecute and all that. I think the government's gonna end up telling us, we really tried. There's not much we can do. We got a couple of these small fish, like a Governor Richardson or somebody like that. They'll throw a couple people maybe to the sharks. And all the people that were like intimately involved in pushing this and giving him power, giving him access to other people in power, will go free.
I was just surprised that she was arrested here in New Hampshire, because there was a story in the Daily Mail, a week or so ago, that she was in this townhouse in Paris, right? On the right bank, and this very luxurious apartment there, and then that turned out to be false, I guess, because I mean, so like, if she had this much power and this many connections, how did she not manage to leave the country?
Yeah, it's really strange. I mean, there's certainly places she could have gone where she would have, like, the U.S. wouldn't have been able to get her, or they would have said they couldn't get her, and it would have been very comfortable for everybody. But I don't know.
And the way I see it is that unless she turned into a mole person, how is it that she has been on U.S. soil, let's assume this whole time, and now is when they are arresting her?
Right.
You can say that it would have been more difficult if she was overseas. She could have been anywhere, but she was right here in the United States. And again, unless she told him that she turned into a mole person, she just completely started living under a rock, then I really don't know how she has evaded being caught.
I think there's no coincidence that the attorney for the Southern District of New York was fired by Trump, like within, a week and a half or whatever of this particular arrest, because maybe Trump saw what they were going to do, and, because they were investigating that whole case, right? And so maybe that ties into it, and maybe we'll never know. But I'm just wondering that sometimes you see things happening simultaneously, and it just raises a lot of red flags.
And isn't that just awful that that's how we have to think of our government and everything that happens? We have to be so skeptical of everything.
Yes,
we do.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's pretty horrific to know that there is this power structure that doesn't include us, and just laughs at the idea of us trying to have justice and trying to have a say into how our government works.
I mean, it reminds me of like after 9/11, how all the Bin Ladens just left, a couple days later on these charter flights out of the country with no kind of investigation ever. There was no investigation ever done. I mean, there was a 9/11 commission, but it wasn't really an investigation in terms of like a forensic investigation, and these people just left in a couple days after. And you think they would at least want to sequester them and ask them questions and kind of see, like, what do they know about Osama bin Laden or what, whatever. But they were just whisked out of the country, and it seems like how come Ghislaine Maxwell couldn't pull the same strings and get out of the country? It just surprised me that she was not able. That she was not.
She had access to how many hundreds of friends with private jets. They could have gotten her. Yeah, they certainly. There was something done on purpose in her hanging around. I don't get it. Yeah.
Okay, so on the assumption that maybe this has something to do with trying to get Trump before November, there are a couple of ads that came out recently. One from Vote. I think it's Vets Vote. Vote Vets. Mm-hmm. It's a political action committee. They had an ad comparing Trump to Benedict Arnold. He's a traitor. And there's another ad that came out from the Lincoln Project, which is a group of mostly Republicans and some former Trump supporters who are, again, calling Trump a traitor, but really a traitor to Russia. And I thought these are, I think these are aimed at capturing.
A traitor to Russia?
What's that?
A traitor to Russia?
A traitor for Russia. Sorry.
Oh,
a traitor.
I was like, what?
Reinterpret that.
Yeah, who's working for who, right?
I know.
Did you guys see that ad at all?
Yeah, I saw that Jamal Thomas, he was actually talking about this.
Okay. I just thought it's interesting how they're going after Trump, not for his overt racism and anti-left, rhetoric, but they're going after him on this, you're a traitor to the country. So it seems once they're trying to appeal to the independent voters, who might, because people on the left are all going to vote. You assume we're going to vote for Biden, right?
No, I haven't seen it. What's the line of attack on the traitor? Is it something like you let us down over? Yeah, you let us down over COVID, or you're actively working with the Russians, or
that's about
Hasn't this thing about whether he heard about the Russian bounties gone back and forth about whether that's true or not?
Well, he said it's a hoax.
And doesn't it seem like a whole distraction since the Afghan papers have come out and showed that Afghanistan has been a big money pit that's done nothing but been hurtful to soldiers with no gain, and where there was a danger of us pulling out of Afghanistan, and so now this comes up, right? And that's my view of it.
I don't think that it's a mistake. I don't think it's a mistake that, remember, I told you guys about last week on the Legislative Week in Review about that legislation that was brought forth to withdraw troops from, or reduce the troops, remember? And it was all based on that it wasn't going to mess with the mission, that it, you know what I'm saying, that it was in the best interest of the United States and all this stuff. And then this comes out. I don't think that is a mistake.
I agree. I agree. I think this is a distraction. Though it's kind of funny. Like they didn't really need to be worried about Americans paying attention to the Afghan papers, right? Because you didn't hear like anything about that at all, except for alternative media. And everyone should be up in arms to say all this money. Stop abusing our troops, using them in a way that disrespects them, and we need the money here at home, obviously. But you hear nothing. It's really disappointing.
Well, this is obviously just a propaganda ploy. I mean, whether it's true or not, whether the Russians are paying bounties or not. I mean, obviously the whole thing is like, it's to elicit an emotional response. Like, oh my God, they're the KGB is paying, the Taliban to kill our boys and our girls over there or whatever. And, which may or may not be true, but there's no convincing evidence has been provided so far, except for like unnamed sources, right? Unnamed intelligence sources.
It's also classic gaslighting and swiftboating, right? And basically take something and make it the opposite of what it is. I mean, Trump was looking to pull troops out of Afghanistan, so which is actually respecting using them in the correct way, right? For a worthwhile mission. If it's not a worthwhile mission, pull them out. And so they're essentially gaslighting us and swiftboating him by making him seem like a traitor.
Yeah, and Trump is. I mean, I'm sorry, but he's an idiot. He was on the right track sometimes, but I mean, he's out in South Dakota talking about the extreme left, pulling down statues as a threat or whatever. I mean, this is his campaign promise was to get out of these foreign entanglements. And bring troops home. And he's actually, when he's starting to do that, that's the real threat to the national security, to the neoliberal world order. And that's when they feel threatened. They're not threatened by the racism, by all the other stuff. And Trump, why isn't he seizing on this and saying, calling a spade a spade? I mean, because these people are, they're the enemy, and he could probably create some support for himself by calling them out on it, but he's not.
Oh, I agree 100%. If he were to simply say what we've just discussed, basically the Afghan papers come out, it shows that this is a complete disrespect to soldiers to use them in an incorrect way like this. That's not for the good of the American people or anybody. And the fact that he was considering pulling them out, and all of a sudden this thing comes up, you just call that out exactly like you say, Steve.
But we also have to remember that every single time that he starts to try to take action towards peace or de-escalation, what happens? On the left, they go and they attack him from the right.
Yes.
And he is in bed with Russia, or that he's a Russian puppet, or they do things to undermine it, even though he is taking actions that his base supposedly is for.
Well, they're both attacking each other on the left. So they're attacking Trump as being in bed with Putin, right? And then the Trump campaign is attacking Biden of being a leftist, which is like absurd. But that's they're both going after this old Cold War phobia of the left, and I just don't see it as being effective, because people under 40 don't even remember the Soviet Union or the Cold War, and how is that going to get people riled up? I mean,
yeah, I think you're right. Especially under 40s are just laughing about this. Like, what is this? What is this Putin Russia stuff? What is that about? That's crazy,
Well, and I mean, how is Russia a threat to them? They're like, I can't pay my rent. I have medical bills or whatever. I'm worried about this stuff. You're telling me Russia is the biggest threat? I mean, I don't, people they just don't, I don't think it's convincing.
But it goes to, I guess, work as a cover for them to be able to be inept and do nothing, but appear like they're doing something because they're resisting.
Right. Yeah.
That's it. It's just all about resisting Trump, which, again, it goes back to that argument of electing Trump again can be good because, supposedly you would still have that sector that is still riled up. People wouldn't go back to sleep. You have that argument. But then you also have the argument that, again, he takes all the air out of the room, and the whole conversation just becomes, but Trump. And then you can't do anything.
Yeah,
I thought it might be one of you. Was one of you guys that said that nobody builds a mansion when they're in power; it's when they're out of power. Was it one of you guys, or was that Sager or somebody? I can't remember. Recently, I heard that basically saying that it's easy to be out of power. It's easy to fundraise off of Trump bad man, Trump orange man. And they. I wouldn't doubt if they essentially wanted that again, because it's so easy to do that, to play that part.
And then they can still do the bidding of the corporations, the big banks and the military industrial complex and the pharmaceutical industrial complex and all of these the prison industrial complex. They can do the bidding of all their overlords And in the meantime, we get fucked over.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think the efforts are aimed at those undecided voters because they want to, right now it's like, well, it looks like Biden is going to win, but who knows what's going to happen over the next 4 months. And they want to probably bring out some Epstein connection with Trump. And then they'll talk about Trump as a traitor. So all those older people, the over 50 people who are a lot of them were Trump supporters, especially like in the South. If all of a sudden they see, oh, Trump is a traitor, whatever, some of them might go over to Biden as like the lesser evil, right? So I think that's what's behind this, because the younger people, like, they're concerned about climate change, they're concerned about student loan debt and everything, and Biden really isn't addressing those things, but Trump is almost, is like a climate denier or whatever. So I think they're probably, most of them are going to vote either for Biden or they're going to vote for somebody else, but they're not going to necessarily vote for Trump. So I think this campaign is targeting those voters who were kind of the core of Trump support in 2016.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if Biden feels obligated to tip his hat to a Green New Deal or some minor version of that, right? It seems like, Siberia was 95 degrees for like a week in a row or something,
right.
Like 40 or 50 degrees above normal, and
right.
Him needing to address that in some way. It seems like he ought to be able to, just make a statement that he has no intention of actually fulfilling. But
well, he will, like right before,
yeah.
in the debates or right before the election, he'll come out and say, like, I'm supporting the Green New Deal now or whatever. He'll do whatever. I mean, that'll there's still time for that.
Right.
He'll emerge from his lair and come out with some statements, some promises. But I kind of like they're just letting Trump self-destruct at this point. I mean, Trump just seems like he's floundering, and like he's doing this rally in South Dakota. It just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, it might be personally reassuring for him, but it didn't seem like it's getting him any new converts.
Right, and related to all this, basically, I think the Democrats came out and did say that it will be a virtual convention. All these delegates that have already been screwed over and already been, the true progressives have been replaced anyway. But they want no chance of there being any visible protest of their policies or anything. So it's going to be completely virtual, completely controlled, backroom dealings to figure out who's the actual nominee if Biden falls apart.
Right.
They're dreamland. They're dreamland.
Right, exactly.
And I think also it sheds light on the fact that during the debates, we're going to see no talk of policy. Everything is just going to be ad hominem attacks, most likely.
Yes.
It's all going to be about Russia and about China, and
they'll tip their hats.
It's going to be nothing to the American people, and the only people that are going to tune in, they're just going to tune in because they think, what are these two old guys who can barely, string two sentences together? What's this going to be like? It's just the shock value that people are going to check in for. Other than that, the people that were already apathetic, which is a good majority, especially of young people, if they weren't already checked out, they're definitely going to check out by the time this happens. And then we're just going to have somebody take over or stay in power, and again, they're going to go unchecked.
Yeah, unless are we talking about we're talking about both the debates and the convention, right? Kind of there. Yeah. I think on the convention, I'm sure the Democrats will pull some move like have Oprah Winfrey speak about Black Lives Matter or something like that. They'll pull something like that will pull in some people, right? They'll get some famous people to talk about, and they will tip their hat.
They're going to definitely harp on the identity politics. It's
Yeah.
going to be.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Is there'll be tons of that, and even though they have no plans to do any kind of UBI to help all the people that are about to get thrown out in the street in a month or so.
So it really doesn't.
Whatever their identity is,
it doesn't matter really. I mean, it does matter who wins, but it also, in a sense, that in terms of things really fundamentally changing, I see more as it coming from a grassroots populist level, and this is what Caitlin Johnstone has been talking about, the change in consciousness taking place, rather than through policy changes from the top. Because I don't see Biden all of a sudden pushing through real seminal climate change policies going beyond Green New Deal, or it's going to be some watered down version of that, and also he's going to address whatever the police reform, watered down police reform. So like, whether Trump or Biden wins at this point, I mean, it's kind of like they represent the old, Biden even more so represents the old, status quo. And,
sure.
And like if people, like if things get really bad, like the unrest gets bad, like, you think it's bad now, but wait till like right now they're cutting that $600 a week supplement for unemployment. That's running out.
That's coming up soon. Yeah.
Yeah. So people are going to get like, all of a sudden it's going to get really nasty. And they're talking about that foreclosure tsunami. So that could happen, like we got 4 months now, 2 months down the road, 2 months before November, you could see things get really, really bad and explode in kind of like a lot of really bad unrest. And then where are things going to, how are things going to go from there? The election may seem almost like a, a backdrop to like the main action, which is going to be on the streets, could be on the streets. And I'm not like kind of, Schadenfreude, like, I don't want to see that happen, but I see that as potential, because they're not, the main established parties are not addressing the issue, the fundamental issues.
Yeah, the possible directions things could go from here with all the various moving pieces, COVID, and the protests and people being awakened to the fact, hopefully, that there's injustice. Hopefully they bring it. They recognize that it goes well beyond the police state. That the police state is just a fact, a part of our overall oligarchy that's keeping us in check. And even the Maxwell thing could play in. You could have like a major politician get named in a way that throws things completely off. I mean, who knows? I mean, there's so many different paths things could take from here.
Well, it just seems to me it's kind of like a house of cards, or maybe the metaphor is like kindling, waiting for a spark to take off, because somebody at the top, you get somebody at the top who has access to all this Epstein evidence, and they get that, they get a copy of that CD that has like the video of whatever, Clinton and Trump and Dershowitz and all these people, and all of a sudden like that gets out. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, just
right,
everything could be turned on its head pretty quickly.
Yeah, the woman from ABC News that said, right, there was the secret recording of her talking about how the ABC News squashed it,
right?
Supposedly so they could continue to get information from or interviews with the royal family. But she basically said, we had the Clintons, we had everything,
right?
Did they say Trump?
I don't remember that she said Trump.
Trump, I assume is guilty of, there's been so many allegations of rape against him. I assume he's kind of had lawyers squash things that, he's guilty of anyway, but.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't jump to conclusion about Trump. Maybe he wasn't involved in this because he had his own, coterie of.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think he's guilty of crimes, but I don't see him tied to the Epstein thing, but it doesn't really matter. It's still just that power gets away with this stuff.
I mean, Trump's also like, he's very street smart. And I think, he would recognize efforts at entrapment more than some of these other people might.
True. Yeah.
I'm just saying these people that the whole thing, it was an entrapment scheme as far as I can tell. So they would get these people, and get them maybe a little, have a couple of glasses of wine or whatever, and then kind of get them in this situation. And,
right. Yeah, that would be the whole Mossad. That would be the whole Mossad CIA angle. Would be basically, get something on powerful people. Absolutely.
I mean, it's a blackmail scheme. It's not. It's kind of like, okay, work with us and nothing bad will happen. But
yeah, and that's part of the reason a lot of people had problems with a lot of the reporting on it and the Netflix reporting, et cetera, because it's basically trying to say, look what bad things this guy did, without bringing in the connections with Mossad or CIA or anything like that.
Well, like Whitney Webb says on the Last American Vagabond, that Epstein was a middle management. I mean, he did not. He was kind of a functionary, and he was a high up functionary, but he was not running the whole show. He was working for others. I mean,
I'm sure of that, yeah.
And the others, helped him. It was assisted suicide, right? So I mean, there was definitely, he was not acting. It was not just like these individual people doing bad things. It was obviously there's some kind of bigger picture there.
So I wanted to bring up that I think it's kind of interesting how, from the Democrat side of it, the way that they went and passed the HEROES Act, it really does put it as though this is on Trump and the Republicans. That, so this is a good tactic for them when it comes to November, to try to cover for Biden, to seem as though, look, you see, we're trying to do something for you, to give that olive branch to the people. But I think it's really interesting how on the right, how there really is no party loyalty to Trump. The Republicans really do not care. And it's very interesting because obviously I would think that they've been enjoying how much power they've had, and they want to continue to have that power. But the fact that they have been sitting on this bill on the Senate side, and that Mitch McConnell doesn't even, he doesn't even want to bring it up, this hurts Trump significantly. That's the one thing that, I mean, obviously, I always say, if he really wanted to help people, he could just sign an executive order. Giving money to the people, if that's really what he wanted, because that's what he says, right? Because recently he's been on a lot of what?
How could he just sign an executive order giving? Because I mean, does the Congress control the purse strings? That's what I always learned in junior high school.
Well, I mean, technically, yeah, of course, but I mean, also, they're not supposed to be governing through executive order, but, Obama made that kind of famous, and that's why he's been able to, Trump has been signing all these executive orders and he even said that if they didn't want, with the border wall, that if they weren't going to pass the appropriations for the border wall, that he was just going to sign an executive order for it, right?
But now that's being challenged, and I'm just saying, like, you're talking about like hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean,
I understand that. I'm not questioning that. What I'm saying is that if he's gone on all these interviews lately and said that, that he wants to get more people out for the people, or more money out for the people, and that, he wants to give more money than what the Democrats wanted to give, that's what he keeps saying. And if that's the case, well then, you rule through executive order, so why not do that? But like I said, the fact that this is being held up by the Senate, and this doesn't reflect well on Trump. This is something that the voters are going to remember come November. If they, if you have, 30 million people get evicted from their homes, or, and you have all these people, on unemployment, because we're just thinking about this now. We have to think about the fact that now there's a second wave supposedly that's happening, right? And they're starting to shut down a bunch of states. They were reopening, and now they're slowing it down, or they're just closing up altogether, right? And so what's going to happen? You're going to have businesses that, again, they're going to have to shut down, and especially in states like Florida, where tourism is huge. That's where they make all their money, in a lot of parts of Florida. So this is really going to impact the people, and Florida is a key state for Trump. So I think these are all pieces that are coming together, and it's definitely, that's why I have no idea what's going to happen come November.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it certainly has been a never Trumper faction with the Republicans the whole time. That basically they don't want, whether you call Trump a populist or whatever. I mean, I kind of consider him to be one. They certainly don't like that lack of control, somebody out there. And I really love the idea. I find a really interesting idea if he were to, do an executive order for a UBI for the duration of COVID, it would be interesting. It certainly would come up for like legal challenge. But does that really want to be where is that really where the Democrats want to be? Challenging, giving the people relief when they're about to get evicted, you know? So
but is Trump
it might be a brilliant move, even if it's not completely like legal or whatever. Or wouldn't he?
It's just the optics of it. The fact that he's willing to do something for the people when others aren't.
I mean, let's just see if he has the street smarts to kind of figure it out, because right now he's out, you know, at Mount Rushmore, and he's not like, you know, rallying the American people. I mean, he's going to his core supporters, but I mean, you know, why not? Yeah, I mean, he did allude to the fact that there might be a second check, right, coming to people, but it's like between that and defending the withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think he could get a lot of popular support. So why isn't he on his soapbox talking about this 24/7? You know, I mean, even if the media is not going to like it and the Republicans aren't going to like it, because you know it's going to mean less money for Halliburton and Raytheon and everybody, but that's where his support, the support that he has, and the support that he used to win in 2016, that's what they want. I mean, forget about the you know, the white supremacists and them. You know, that's part of his constituency, but by and large, it was these people who were like wanted to drain the swamp, right? Who wanted to get rid of all the corruption and the, you know, the money in politics, and that Trump is independent, a non-politician, independently wealthy. He's not going to be subject to that, supposedly, to those temptations. You know, so it baffles me why Trump isn't. It seems like maybe he's going to spring back or something, but right now he's kind of in. He's in, you know, the analog to Biden in his basement is Trump going to Mount Rushmore and kind of just, you know, with his core supporters.
Yeah, it's hard to say what his tactics are here. I mean, I don't know if he thinks he's going to, if he shows that he gets so many people at rallies or whatever, again, does he think he's going to shame Biden out of the basement, and that's ultimately what he needs, is Biden to get out there and talk unscripted. He needs Biden to get out there and start like yelling at voters and tell them to vote for Trump again. You know, I mean,
yeah. Why isn't he attacking Biden and saying, "Hey, Joe, why don't you get out of your basement? Come and, you know." He could be doing that. He's not doing that.
Yes, yeah, I don't know. I don't understand what his, but I do also question when they basically say that Biden, you know, has this thing sewn up and he's ahead by 10% and all that. Yeah, you know, some of the polls, and they say there's a lot of overpolling of Democrats and everything, but when you look at the enthusiasm and those polls, which a lot of them don't mention, the gap is huge. The people that will vote for Biden, they overwhelmingly are doing it because they feel they need to and they have no choice and they're not happy about it. And there is a segment that's still excited to vote for Trump. So I don't know why all the polling places are doing this thing and all the media is playing it up like it's like they're replaying 2016, which didn't work out well, you know.
Right.
So I don't know what they're doing, you know.
Well, there might be some kind of October surprise, number one, and then number two, like we said, like the unrest might be much worse by then too. So, you know, all bets are off pretty much. So just because the polls show this, whatever, you know, Hillary was going to win with 95% probability, right? So I mean,
exactly, yeah. Tough to say.
Can I bring up this I know we had talked about it, or Daisy and I had talked about it off you know, during the week. But there was this episode of Glenn Greenwald's System Update, in which he addressed this. There was this criticism of the Hill, the Rising, by Nathan Robinson from Current Affairs. And Glenn Greenwald did this long show. I mean, normally it's like an hour and a half, and he did an introduction where he talked about the issues, but then he had on Nathan Robinson to talk about why he wrote this. And specifically, it was a review of the book, A Populist Guide to 2020 by Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty. And then he had Crystal Ball on kind of as a response. And it was pretty obvious that Glenn Greenwald sympathized more with Crystal Ball's point of view. And I don't agree with either of them really. I mean, I guess I'm more sympathetic to Crystal Ball, but I also see the limitations to what she is espousing. But in any case, I thought it was interesting because not so much for the content of the debate, but I have a lot of friends, who are my age, who like want Biden no matter what. I mean, they just think they got to get rid of Trump. We got to get Biden in there. And that's kind of what this guy, Nathan Robinson, was calling for, that basically we should not even be talking to people on the right. So like by extension, Sagar should not be on the show, should not be on the Rising, because Crystal Ball should not be giving time to somebody who's a so-called right populist. And he grouped Sagar with people like Mussolini, Bolsonaro in Brazil. He considered, right populists, and he was calling for, we have to have somebody we have to go to the left. And the point of view of Crystal, I think, is that and Sagar, for that matter, is that the issue is really not so much left versus right as populism versus elites versus duopoly versus the war machine, in which both parties kind of work together, and that the populism you see on the right in this country in terms of support for Trump is not the same. There are similarities, but it's not the same as the populism you saw in fascist Italy or Germany or other places. So I thought that was interesting because it's a way. How do you have that debate with people who say Biden, we have to get rid of Trump, support Biden no matter what? And these are the same people that if I criticize anything about Biden, they're all over me for like, why are you attacking our candidate? And I think it's important to be able to, rather than just get into a slugfest with these people, to kind of come up with a rational argument that, okay, Trump is really bad. I mean, he's has fascist overtones. He's a racist. Biden would be better in that respect, but Biden's really not going to change anything. How do we have that discussion, and how do we move beyond just like Democrat versus Republican? Like Democrats are left and Republicans are right. I think that's the way a lot of older people still see it. How do you move beyond that? And I thought that's why this, to me, was very interesting that issue is not really being addressed. And I frankly, I'm kind of at a loss how to respond to sometimes to people who are like that, who say, we should support Biden and we should not attack Biden at all because that will decrease his chances of winning against Trump.
Well, it's really hard to deal with people that want to shut down conversation, right? I mean, you've got that's been the major problem. At least since 2016, coming out of 2016, where there was obviously fixing of the primary, Pelosi was basically saying everything's great. The people don't want any change. They think we're going perfect, right? And I think identity politics is another way to shut down any conversation, right? This, I don't know, on media, that a lot of people would use this whataboutism term. Like if somebody talks about one thing, if you were to, if they were to talk about Biden, if you were to talk about Trump, you're not allowed to do that. That's whataboutism, and it's like, wait a minute, comparison is a basic way we make value judgments. Of course that's a valid thing. So I have no answer to how you deal with people who are looking to shut down conversation. I think it's a way for elites or people that just simply want to maintain power.
Well, I mean, obviously these things are a distraction, like the whole, like the identity politics. I mean, again, it's important, of course. It's important for disenfranchised groups, for ignored groups to be recognized, and Black Lives Matter. I support, their aspirations, but the question is, there are other issues like like the militarism, the wars, that's the underlying,
those are the things you're not allowed. Those
You're not
are
allowed
things
to talk
you're not
about
allowed
those
to
things.
talk about. And like I said,
Right.
I can't tell you how many really intelligent, wonderful friends I have that if you were to bring up something like, but Trump hasn't gotten us into any additional wars. The worst thing he's done on militarily is continue Obama's wars in Yemen, slaughtering children or whatever like that, and they just roll their eyes, and there's no conversation there to be had because it's so offensive to them that you would criticize something that I find to be incredibly horrible, that we're supposed to be the good guys and we're part of this destruction of humanity across the globe,
Right.
See, I think the issue comes with the fact that we can't have conversations with each other anymore because we just see each other as labels rather than people. When you think of some of your friends that you're having, that they have certain ideology or whatever, that is how you label them. Even when it comes down to the races, the whole identity politics thing, yes, that is at the core done on purpose so that we can't actually bring about any sort of change because we're too busy attacking each other based on some sort of arbitrary type of division amongst us that really shouldn't exist, right? And we can't have just relative conversations. And even Jim, how just the fact that you can't, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So you can say that you don't support Trump and then also acknowledge the fact that he may have done some things okay. I'm not even going to say right. I'm going to say okay.
Right.
But
or
unfortunately,
not,
some people,
or not
for them,
anything.
it's such a dichotomy. Like you can only have one or the other. It's either like if you say anything positive about Trump, oh, you're a Trumper again with the labels.
Exactly.
Well, if I say anything negative, like I was talking to a friend, who's active in the Democratic Party, and I said, Biden, doesn't look that good these days. Like he just seems like he's in some kind of decline. And she looked at me like, what? I said, well, he seems like he can't put a couple sentences together, and he's just like not as coherent as he used to be. And she's like, are you a Trump supporter? So like the immediate jump was from, if you're criticizing Biden, you must be a Trump supporter. So like I'm not trying to put any walls up. I'm trying to keep an open conversation going. And all I do is kind of almost innocuously suggest that Biden isn't as sharp as he could be, that he's a weak candidate. If the Democrats want to win, they need to have somebody, or they need Biden to improve or whatever. They need somebody stronger. And that is heresy. And I'm a Trump supporter because I'm not standing behind, our man. And how do you, I'm trying to keep an open dialogue going, but with somebody, that's the way some people see it, that if you are at all critical of Biden, then you are a Trump supporter. So it's black and white.
And I think this is accelerated under Trump, but I think to some extent it's always existed. If you were to make favorable comparisons on one subject out of 100 for a Republican versus a Democrat before, with Bush or whoever, I think I felt I would be subject to the same thing.
But Trump's he's not really a Republican. I mean, he is kind of, he's a lifelong Democrat, and now he's going against the war machine, at least as far as Afghanistan is concerned. And that really, that pisses off the national security, the neocons. But but still my friend is going to say, well, Trump is bad because of, he's racist and all these things, but they're not talking about the war issues,
and that's because the people in power have succeeded in distracting us with relatively little concerns, and just taking everyone just kind of considers there's a permanent state of war and there's nothing they can do about it. It's too complicated to think about.
Right. And you also have to remember that you have this, your ideology, right? Because of what you have consumed, the information that you have consumed, and how, you arrived at it whenever you did, but not everybody arrives at the same level at the same time, you know? And all we can do is just continue to put this message out, you know, and hopefully people will listen to it, and then they will see, hopefully eventually. And if they don't, well, I mean, then they don't. But that all we can, like, that's all you can do. I oftentimes I think to myself that a lot of people, they try to go around convincing other people of how they should look at things or whatever it may be. And I think that we have to let that go, because you think you're right and that other person thinks that they're right. That and who's to say that you actually are correct? You know what I'm saying? And I'm not in the business of trying to convince anybody, you know, or make or change anybody's mind about things. If that happens, then awesome.
Well, wait a second.
I don't go out of my way to do that.
You worked on the Tulsi campaign, weren't you trying to get people to vote for Tulsi? I mean, isn't that changing?
All I was doing was that I was putting out her information. I mean, she sold herself. I didn't need to try to sell her to people. I didn't need to try to convince people that she was the person. No, she did that all on her own. All I did was help spread that message to the people that were willing to listen to it. And a lot of them, or a good chunk of them, maybe converted, and the other chunk of them, they just didn't feel that. I do think that, you know, because Tulsi was the type of person that if you listen to her, if you actually listen to her, then you got it, you know. For a lot of people, that was the sense that they got. But unfortunately, other things were priorities for a lot of people, especially like in New Hampshire. You know, she did have a lot of support in New Hampshire, but people felt that, you know, it's too dangerous with Trump, and she really didn't have a chance, and all, you know, there were all these other narratives that were being spun around it. And I mean, I can't blame, you know, whoever it is that didn't vote for her, that, you know, whatever media they consumed that changed their mind about things, you know.
But I also think it's strong.
All you can do is you can try and give them the idea that there is other media, and that they need to consider that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, you know, are often lying to them.
I mean, I think you come up with your own perspective, your own paradigm, you know, over years. And sometimes it changes radically. Sometimes you have like a paradigm shift, you know, where all of a sudden, like you see things differently than you did before. So I think things happen. I think you have to have some confidence in your belief system with an openness to be willing to change it. And that's kind of like the scientific approach. You know, you believe in evolution, or you believe in gravity until something else comes along to prove you otherwise. But that's your working hypothesis that you base your actions on. And I think a strong leader does have a certain point of view that they try to bring others into that point of view. So I think like a political candidate like Tulsi, or whether it's, I mean, Biden is really not a good example, but, you know, or Trump, whatever. But I think some candidates have a strong ideological foundation, and they work to bring others into that fold. And they're not always successful, but a good leader is able to, you know, is a good listener, and as well as a good convincer of others to see things their way, and being open to change, of course, in their own perspective at the same time. So I think it's a very complicated dynamic. And I just read that thing. Did you read the thing by Caitlin Johnstone on Medium.com about consciousness changing that she wrote maybe a week or so ago? It was really, really good, because she talks about that people have these little tapes playing in their head all the time, and they see things, you know, they have to convince other people that this is the truth or whatever, and they're pushing it on other people. And she goes as far as to say the whole concept of individual separation is a fallacy. I mean, this is our Western point of view. We've been brought up to think that we're individual, atomistic individuals, and I mean, it's the whole basis for capitalism, right? And that she says that we have to move beyond that concept of separation from others, that really we're connected. And this is supported by, you know, the quantum physics and everything. But I thought it was really interesting for someone who's comments on the political scene to bring in this kind of ethereal, almost spiritual perspective on things.
She's an outstanding writer.
Let's go.
I got a conspiracy corner for you.
All right.
But this is stolen from Kim Iverson.
Hey, here we go.
Right.
I don't believe I talked about this one before. So Kim Iverson had a video basically saying, "Will Hillary Clinton be Biden's real VP?" And her thinking is, Steve, you're nodding your head. Have you heard about this thought?
Yeah, I saw the video.
Yeah, her thinking is really, really well done, and I advise people to check out her video. But to summarize quickly, she's thinking that Kamala Harris has no real convictions on anything. That's been shown, right? She endorsed Medicare for all, and then backed way off into some kind of obscure 10-year plan before we implement it, which means she's going to hand it off to the next president to implement it, right? And everything she goes back and forth, and she doesn't seem to have any political center herself. So she is available to be used as a tool. And basically, Maya Harris, Kamala's sister, has been a top advisor to Hillary. And so the thinking is essentially that, and she is now a top advisor to Kamala. So the thinking is that through that connection, and it's been known that Kamala had access to some of Hillary's top people that were at the State Department and so forth. So the thinking is simply that because Hillary is intolerable to the American public to be elected at this point, I think, especially with this, more Epstein stuff being in the news, web like that, that Kamala would end up being the VP, and that really would be Hillary. And obviously, you get the obvious connection that if Biden then steps down because of health or only a one term or something like that, you really essentially behind the scenes have a President Hillary.
Yeah, I think
that's my nightmare scenario for you.
Well, I mean, I think you got to look at the bigger, the background. It's like, who do the neocons want? Who the neolibs want? So I mean, they want somebody. They want somebody who's going to keep the wars going, who's going to keep the whole system, the corporatocracy going. So, I mean, if Hillary isn't right, then and Hillary's just she's a tool. So whether she's pulling the strings, someone else is pulling Hillary's strings, because ultimately it's like the system of corrupt military intelligence complex that really has all the power behind the scenes. So they're that's ultimately what it's about. So I think it's plausible. It's a plausible scenario, definitely.
Yeah, she seems to be an enthusiastic player in that, right? I mean, whether she's a half puppet herself or puppet master, she's I mean, all you have to ask is where's the next Libya and Syria and going to be, right?
Right.
If she gets in power again.
Yeah, I mean, she's shown her true colors in her past by going after parents of truant students, mostly single mothers in California.
Kamala, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And Kamala, right. And then not going after Steve Mnuchin.
And using prisoners as slave labor to fight California's fires.
Okay, I didn't know about that one.
Oh, yeah, look that up. Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is, like, she's shown her true colors.
Well, not wanting to release people early because they needed that labor, that free labor.
Right. Yeah, actively working to keep people in jail to use for slave labor, because the pool of prisoners they had to be so large when there were a certain amount of fires.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's plugged right into the prison labor, corporate prisons.
I think we could safely say she's not a visionary leader.
No.
And that's that's what we need at this time. And I think people were kind of hoping that Trump would end up being like that, but he's not. So I don't know. I mean, I predict there's going to be somebody coming along in 4 or 8 years who's going to be like, like a right center right populist who's going to be, much more charismatic and much more, suave and is able to pull this off.
That's what I think makes Kamala even more dangerous, is the fact that she would just be like a puppet, because I think that it links it to the way that supposedly Obama, he wasn't really the one that was behind a lot of these things. He was just, he was being run by the banks and by the military industrial complex and just letting them run the show. And because he was the first Black president, and because he had a beautiful Black family, and there was no scandals during his his tenure, that and again, because he it made gay marriage legal, like all this kind of stuff. Like just all these identity politics. He checked off all these boxes. It's the same thing with Kamala, right? She would be the first female president. She's Black, you know, even though I feel, at least from what I've seen, she identifies more with her Indian side than with her Black side. You know, and so everybody would just be, and you get all the Hillary supporters who are, you know, with their pussy hats, who are like, yay, you know, we won, you know, Hillary won finally, you know, they get their vindication essentially. And then in the meantime, what are they going to be doing, you know, overseas? What are they going to be doing to our banking system? What are they going to be doing to, you know, just privatize everything and doing things the neoliberal way?
Right. Nothing's going to change. I mean, or it's going to go back to status quo ante, right? You know?
That's what Biden promised, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
nothing to normal.
Yeah, nothing will absolutely change regarding Medicare for all or free college or any of the things that we, you know, really need. But yeah, some new countries will get destroyed. Some more barriers to profit or fracking or whatever will get taken down.
But there's a little problem with that scenario, because number one, the problems are going to keep getting worse, and that's the only number, really. Number one, the problems are going to keep getting worse. You're going to have global warming. It's going to keep climate change is going to keep getting worse. Economic disparity is going to keep getting worse. The healthcare crisis is going to keep getting worse. The student loan debt crisis is going to keep getting worse. These things, you know, you can talk around it as much as you want, but unless you deal with these issues head on, they're not going to get resolved, and they're going to fester, and they're going to get worse, and you're going to have more and more crises coming up. So, like, yeah, you might have Kamala Harris, you know, and go, yay, you know, our first you know, woman president. That's great, but if they don't really address the issues, then, you know, the issues are going to address themselves. They're going to make themselves.
And I agree with that, but think about how how loved Obama is. Everyone thinks that Obama is this angel that came down from heaven. You know what I'm saying? Like, they have no idea about what actually happened under his administration.
Right.
And I just feel that the same thing would happen. I mean, obviously the situation is getting worse, you know, since, you know, Obama was in office to now, things are a lot different. But because the left would have these, again, they would check these boxes, it would appease them, even if it's superficial. I honestly think that would really rile up a lot more people, because obviously you would have the right, you know, who would they just think of this as, if Trump doesn't win, then it was all rigged, and it's, you know, and they never let him have a fair presidency, which I don't know that I disagree with that. You know, I think that is kind of fair. But, you know, they will be riled up in that sense. And then you have the left, who is who eventually, after they see that things just did not get better, even though we have our first Black female president, you know, that they will finally get up and do something. But the problem is, it's not a guarantee, because unfortunately, as long as they keep throwing us little crumbs, a lot of people are willing to just roll over and have their belly scratched.
So that's a good point. Like, you know, when W was in power, there were war protests, etc. They went away under Obama, essentially, right? And all right, now we have all these mass protests going on under Trump. Would that simply go away under, you know, Kamala and Biden?
Like treatment of immigrants too, and the deportations, which were really high under Obama, you know.
Oh, they were record setting,
Kids in cages under Obama.
The geopolitics that has led to this massive refugee crisis and, you know, an immigration crisis that we have here in the United States. You know, that we never talk about what led to that. We only talk about what is happening now. But it's just like how Jimmy Dore always says, that it was a problem when Trump didn't want to let the refugees into the country, but it wasn't a problem when Obama was bombing these countries, causing these refugees to come, to flee,
as well as the disruption of global markets with trade agreements and so forth, right? And overthrowing people in other countries and so forth, and disrupting them.
Can I segue into my Moscow minute? And I'm just going to keep it at 1 minute. But I think, and I said this before, I think this is why we need to keep a global perspective in mind, that we really need to work in national politics. We need to work through parties. We need to work outside of parties. We need to do work in populist movements. But I think we need to look, the whole Black Lives Matter thing was an international phenomenon. And I think the issues now are international. I mean, the pandemic, climate change, these are all international issues, and the economy are international issues. And the rest of the world is also waking up to the U.S., as being the hypocrite, U.S. government being the hypocrite that it is. And I think we need a global approach, and not communist international, which was the Russian approach, but we need some kind of international approach. And I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be kind of like, I don't think revolution is inevitable, but I think change is inevitable. So I differ from the classic Marxist theory in that approach. But I think there has to be we have to keep a global perspective in mind, and we need to work with our global partners in around the world, and as well as working within this country. That's it.
I mean, you did say that you're not into sovereignty, right?
Well, I mean, sovereignty is a reality that we have right now, but obviously sovereignty is, it means more for some countries than others. You look at like new countries like South Sudan or East Timor, or you look at Iraq, right? I mean, there was this, L. Paul Bremer, was appointed to manage that country when they were doing nation building under Bush after the Iraq War. And it was based on this naive assumption that somehow Iraqis were going to unite around the idea of national sovereignty. Whereas these were just like in the Middle East, those borders were drawn up in the Sykes-Picot Agreement in World War I, after World War I, and they were just done on the back of a napkin, basically. They did not consult with the people there at all. And so as a result, these basically different alliances and different tribes and different languages and cultures were just arbitrarily separated into by a line, those international borders. So in that sense, sovereignty is almost kind of like, doesn't really mean too much. And the United States has a strong sense of a mission, the Declaration of Independence, bringing that back to today, the breaking away from Britain and creating this model of freedom that was kind of a new thing. So I think we have a strong sense of sovereignty, and it's not bad to have a sense of pride in your history and a pride in how you got to be where you are and your aspirations as a people, as a nation. But the idea of a sovereign country being U.S. being represented by military, by nuclear weapons, by the threat of mass violence against other countries, is that really the kind of sovereignty that we want? Or trying to manipulate the economy so we can milk the resources and wealth of other people around the world for our benefit? Because who are we? We're a melting pot of a nation. We're not just one people. So it's kind of like hypocritical. You're talking about making our country better at the expense of everyone else. I think we have to move beyond that. So whether it's actual abandonment of sovereignty ultimately, and I'm not one of these world government people, but we have to look beyond just pursuing national interests at the expense of the planet. Okay.
Well, see, I think that's where so I do understand that technically statehoods and borders, all that, it is all arbitrary, right? And I do believe that we are all one people, essentially. But I think where the danger comes in is that you cannot, there is absolutely no way of having every single person represented in any sort of these decisions that end up ultimately being made on behalf of countries, right? So when you think about how we work in NATO and even the UN, all these things. So we have these certain countries that have more power than other countries, and just because they're bigger or because their GDP or their military might, whatever it may be, that that they end up making decisions for these other countries that maybe these decisions they don't work for the people that actually have to live under these mandates, and so I think that is where it's a very unclear, opaque line, of like where do you draw the line?
Right, but maybe you could do some things like reform the UN, or you can create some transnational institutions that have more power and more equitable representation of different people around the world. So yeah, you're not going to have it so everyone has an equal vote. It's not going to be a perfect system, but right now it's so skewed that you really need to move in a direction of more democratic representation, however you do that. And it's not going to be perfect, but anything, even a small change in that direction would be huge. Because right now, we have people like John Bolton who think that the U.S. should dictate to the rest of the country, rest of the world, how they should run their affairs, and that ultimately the U.S. Washington D.C. should run global policy, militarily and economically. And I just don't think, the rest of the world wants to go along with that for the most part.
I agree with you. I'm just saying that you're talking about having, a global community coming up with things that, that will work for the globe. And right. Unfortunately, there is always going to be some sort of disparity. And who
right.
is it that gets, the bad luck of having to pay that price?
Right.
That's the only thing.
Well, it's a conflict between, again, it's freedom versus justice. So you have to have economic justice and you have to have freedom. So, I mean, the point is, like, you have basic human rights. I mean, this whole,
but the problem is that those things look different to everybody. That's the issue, is that we can't ever come together on what these things look like, because for every person they just have a different perspective.
How about the right to life? I mean, is that the right to live your life? Is that not a transnational aspiration?
You're not getting an argument from me. What I'm saying is that, okay, so like then you have the abortion argument of right to life. When does life begin? You see what I'm saying? Like,
unfortunate choice
there's
of words,
there's always that arbitrary line of where do you go?
Right,
it's
but
like a seesaw.
bombing, killing civilians through. I mean, obviously that's a war crime. It's already, it's against the Geneva Convention, right? But like, it's not. Nobody's held.
But they're seen as collateral damage, right? That I'm not saying that that's what I'm thinking. I'm saying that unfortunately that's how it's seen, as that it's collateral damage because the United States needs to be safe. It's for our safety that we go and we murder people.
But it's not done through any kind of due process. Like George Bush said before, in the build-up to the Iraq War, the UN can choose to be relevant or not. So basically, the message was, we're going to do whatever we want to do, and if you want to support us, great. If not, we're going to still do it anyways.
Jim?
I'm still back domestically, thinking about what Steve was saying several minutes ago, and that Nick Brana had basically been saying with the Movement for a People's Party that some of the Yang Gang people actually joined in on Thursday, and they're actually having a week from today. There's a map available on Movement for a People's Party site where they're essentially saying that Congress is saying there's going to be they're still going back and forth with the last stimulus, and they're making actual demands of defunding police and diverting funds back to schools, Medicare for all, monthly $2,000 cash payments, etc. So they're going to be actually demonstrating for that this coming Saturday. I thought that was interesting.
Are they still calling for unions and the same platform they had before?
For union, what regarding unions?
They were calling. Remember that I would look at the website like a month ago or whatever, and they were calling for strong unions and these basically a traditional left platform.
Oh yeah, I think we're talking about a specifically an action related to COVID and the need for stimulus.
Gotcha.
I think their basic, platform ideals, I think are as they've been. Essentially, good, solid, progressive values.
So I could see Trump pushing for that because it would serve his reelection, pushing for stimulus.
I am really surprised that he doesn't step to the left of the left with something like a UBI. It's really surprising to me that he doesn't do something out there like that.
I mean, it's not left. It's just like, to me, it's just populist. It's just populist.
Yeah.
Mussolini did. He made the trains run on time, right? So he was populist. I mean,
and Hitler supposedly, promised every child would have a glass of milk every day or something like that, right? Something that was back then when you had starving people.
So you remember how last week I said that we had to be on the lookout for the National Defense Authorization Act that was being brought to the Senate floor on this week. And so they presented a few amendments, right? And so for whoever doesn't know what the National Defense Authorization Act or the NDAA 2021. So this bill authorizes fiscal year 2021 appropriations and sets forth policies for Department of Defense programs and activities, including military personnel strengths. It does not provide budget authority, which is provided in subsequent appropriations legislations. But essentially, so it appropriates the funds for the DoD, for the active duty and reserve forces, for maritime matters, and also for the Department of Energy, national security programs, and the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board, right?
Department of Energy is basically nuclear weapons.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that is coming up is for the Space Force. So it's going to be interesting to see how much money is poured into this Space Force.
That's true. Absolutely, yeah.
So then Rand Paul actually introduced an amendment, which I thought was really great. So it says, today, U.S. Senator, and this was on the 1st of July, Rand Paul introduced a bipartisan amendment to S-4049, the NDAA, to end America's longest war and provide bonuses to those who have deployed in support of the global war on terrorism, empowering America to redirect the savings from ending nation building in Afghanistan to the country's needs at home. So the amendment, which is a bipartisan majority eventually voted to table, was based on this Joint Resolution 12, the American Forces Going Home for Noble Service Act, which he introduced with Senator Tom Udall in March of 2019, and it's called the Afghan Service Act. So here is the joint resolution or the amendment. It's only 5 pages long. It's not really long. But I thought that this was really well, the first part of it is okay, but so it's to obviously bring down the end to this war in Afghanistan, right? Where I think it's in about a year, we would be out of Afghanistan altogether. And it's also so it would repeal the authorization for use of military force, which that I also thought was really important. And so I think that, Rand Paul is doing some really great work right now, thankfully. Obviously, he is not perfect. He has his own issues, that I don't agree with, but at the same time, I think that this is really important and needs to be highlighted. So the senators voted 60-33 to table Paul's amendment to the NDAA, effectively pigeonholing it. So the proposal, which was also sponsored by Senator Udall, would remove troops from Afghanistan within a year and give them a $2,500 bonus. And like I said, it would also repeal the 2001 authorization for the use of military force once U.S. troops have left the country. So here's hoping that that actually,
Fantastic.
obviously it's been pigeonholed. His legislation
Yeah.
has been pigeonholed, but
Didn't Trump? I mean, am I wrong that there were other amendments basically require? I know that Trump had threatened to veto the NDAA because there was something in there about keeping troops in Afghanistan in one of the amendments.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
There's a conflict between the warmongers and the Rand Paul's obviously taking on that military complex, right?
Mm-hmm. But you see how the majority of the senators voted to table it, so it won't even get to be any sort of roll call or anything.
Right. Although 60 to 33 is not a it's okay, it's 2-1, but it's still, to me, there's 30. He got 33 to vote in favor of this, right, or at least not to table it. So that says something that if he had 17 more.
Right. Which that's what I'm hoping is that other people will introduce some sort of amendments, that go along this line. He was just one that introduced.
So Kamala Harris voted against it, by the way.
Of course.
See, there you go.
How about Bernie Sanders? I assume he voted.
Let me look it up. I'll look it up. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's interesting that, if there's a lot of popular pressure, if this becomes an issue, like if people make the equation between, civil rights and justice and the wars, then all of a sudden there might be popular pressure, to sway some senators to vote in favor of something like this. But I don't see it happening yet.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to this whole thing with Russia and paying for the bounty of American soldiers. Like all of this coming out at the same time, all these stories coming out at the same time. It's not, by mistake. It's all by design.
Right. I mean, didn't we pay bounties to the Taliban for killing Russian soldiers back in the late 70s, early 80s, right?
Any luck, Jim?
No, I'm not finding it. I found a specific statement by Kamala Harris. I'm not as adept at you as pulling up the vote.
Well, that's okay. It's just interesting. I'm just curious, who those senators were who sided with Rand Paul, but that's fine.
The next story that I wanted to talk about was that the HR 7440 Hong Kong Autonomy Act. So again, we have, all this stuff that's going on behind closed doors. Nobody's talking about this, right? So this just passed in the House and the Senate. So the next, it's going to the president essentially to sign. It's kind of hard to tell what's going to happen because I do know that Trump, he did sign the Human Rights and Democracy Act. The Hong Kong, Human Rights and Democracy Act previously. So, it's not to say that he wouldn't be for signing this bill, but essentially this is to impose sanctions with respect to foreign persons involved in the erosion of certain obligations of China with respect to Hong Kong and for other purposes. So this is where the left and the right can both converge. They can both come together and vote unanimously, essentially, to pass these sanctions. And I wonder how it would be if other countries started sanctioning us. I mean, we do have that Iran now put out an arrest warrant for Trump, right, for the killing of Soleimani. And I think it's only a matter of time before we start to see that these countries are going to start really retaliating. I think that China has put sanctions on the US, but definitely not to any serious degree. And I think that something like this coming about is definitely pushing that forward.
It could happen.
So essentially, like I said, and this is to targeted specifically at foreign nationals and the banks that that do any sort of business in Hong Kong. So again, we got to tie this back to the economy and the trade war, and it's all this big web always. So so from what we can see here, and obviously this didn't take a lot of time from July 1st to the 2nd. They went and they passed all this. Now, granted, they did have these bills introduced, or like similar bills, sister bills, in the month of June. But from June to July, they were able to pass this unanimously in the House. So you see, it says passed without objection, right? And unanimous consent in the Senate. What do you know that they can pass so quickly and so ubiquitously that, you know, they come together on things like this, but they can't come together on getting money to the people or doing things that actually matter to the people?
Well, this doesn't cost anything, and it's China bashing. So, like, they all, you know, nobody wants to be seen as being against that.
But the thing is that it does cost us. I mean, obviously, you're saying that it doesn't cost them anything, you know, politically, but technically, it does cost us, the American people, because again, they are, we were just talking about the NDAA, right? About how they are funding these programs. And so they can fund these programs, but we can't fund things back home. And that is how people need to tie together domestic policy and foreign policy. And us doing these sanctions on other countries, all we're doing is that we're hurting our stance in the world with these other countries. We need to be, like you were saying, building partnerships, right?
Right.
That's what we need to be doing, is working together, not working against each other.
Right.
I mean, it's a neocon agenda, you know, for world American hegemony around the world. So, like, the idea is you got to keep China under control, can't let them control the South China Sea, and Hong Kong, yes, is part of China, but we have to have a say on how it's governed, you know, or keep you know freedom, quote unquote, in Hong Kong. So that's what it's all about. It's just a power play.
Yeah, it's explainable but horrifying that, as you say, that they can't come, that it's not obvious that people need relief during this pandemic, and that it's just not as obvious that, well, you just do that, you know. And the fact they keep throwing dollars in Afghanistan, despite the fact that, you know, the Afghan papers showed that it's been a money pit for 20 years, it's just all very horrifying.
Right. And remember, that's why I was saying the whole issue that I have with the UBI is that it worries me that, you know, this government obviously never puts the American people first, even though technically it's our money, right? That's what
Right.
they're playing with, is our money. But we don't reap the benefits of, you know, of this funding. Instead, it goes to unrest throughout the world. And again, these sanctions, who are they really going to hurt? They're not going to hurt the Chinese government. They're going to hurt the people of China. And that's how we always have to look at this at any sort of geopolitics like this.
Yeah, sanctions kill children across the world, basically. That's the way the American people have to think of it when they hear sanctions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it's just horrendous at the fact that they are able to just come together and just so quickly. And this is backdoor. Do you see them talking about this in the news everywhere? No.
Yeah. Right.
They're able to do all these things backdoor, and no one. It's all hush hush. And then obviously you have people like Kamala who use this as like a photo op type of thing. To appear as though, because remember, if she's trying to be Biden's VP, then her being for this bill is her trying to be tough on China, which is a good look for Biden.
Right.
So again, it's all this strategy. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's mostly posturing. I don't see it as, I mean, are they really going to go after, I guess they can, theoretically, right? Go after these foreign banks or individuals, entities, whatever they call them, as a result of that. I mean, I believe it when I see it.
All right. Well, we'll see. Like I said, it hasn't. It's on the president's desk now, so we'll see. But I did want to show that you know, the people that are supporting this are Lindsey Graham, of course. We have Jeff Merkley. So we know that, again, it's bipartisan. It's not a Republican thing. We have Martha McSally, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, and Ben Sasse. So when you have that little crew together, you can just imagine what good comes of that. And just to be fair, because you remember how I went after that Masto representative, I also wanted to look into Ben Sherman, who is the person who introduced, the representative who introduced the House version of this Hong Kong Autonomy Act. And so when you look at his figures, I mean, that's not too bad, right? So first election 1996, you know, next election 2020. This is how much he's raised. When you look at the money that other people have raised, really.
So he's a rep, not a senator. Okay, just to keep in perspective. Yeah. So that's right. Yep.
Okay. So, but then you look at who is it that contributes to his funds, right? And so you have Blackstone.
Blackstone.
Of course.
Right.
You have BlackRock, right?
BlackRock and Blackstone are the same thing, right? Essentially. Blackstone became BlackRock, I believe.
I'm not sure about, but yeah. I mean, and again, it's not even like he's raising that much money, which just makes it even worse because it makes you a cheap bitch, you know, like.
It doesn't. It's like, you know, $20 bill to a city council member. They're like, wow, you know, it doesn't take much.
It's crazy. And then of course the industries that fund him: securities and investment, real estate, insurance, accountants, and pro-Israel. So you take with that what you will, right? And obviously he gets the majority. It says here over 50% of his money comes from PAC contributions, and 44% comes from large individual contributions. So he's obviously not a grassroots progressive.
Yes, right.
Even though he's from California. So, you know, and supposedly California Democrats, they're the progressives, right?
Not really.
No.
I know, I'm being facetious.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Didn't pick up on that. Sorry.
I know. I think the people might be, but the people in power are not. Right. There are a lot of really, really excellent progressive Californians, and the people in power just stomped on Medicare for all and every universal health care there and everything. And the leadership is horrific.
Right.
That's
all right, and then the last thing that I wanted to mention, because obviously I have here on my shoulder Free Palestine, and I just wanted to bring this up. This is actually something that happened back in May, but you see how it says, so the Senate committee slips through $38 billion package to Israel. And so this is supposed to be for over the next 10 years, despite ongoing devastation to the US economy. So again, while people are suffering, people are unemployed, they are going to be evicted, okay? They are, you know, they're dying because they have massive medical bills, or because they won't go and get checked medically because of the fact that, you know, they can't afford to. But yet our government, again, can pass these bills to give money to a foreign country. And the only reason why Israel is able to, you know, continue with this occupation, and the fact that you have Netanyahu saying that on July 1st that he was going to go and annex certain parts of Judea and Samaria, okay, like when the only reason why he actually goes and has the gall to declare things like that is because he has the backing of the US. And this blind affinity that people that our Congress people have for Israel, with how, like, knowing what's going on, how do you continue to just constantly fund these atrocities?
So I have two things to say regarding that. Number one, did you cross-reference the list of people that sponsored and voted for this with the list of people that were on the flight manifest for Epstein's Lolita Express, right? Given the Mossad connection.
This didn't pass the Senate yet, right? This just said it passed the committee.
Oh, okay. A second thing is Kim Iverson had recently had an excellent video on just traveling within Palestine and Israel, like how they have different roads and how all the roadblocks work and how all those systems work, like the different roads for Israel basically passport holders, I guess, citizens of Israel versus Palestine and all that. And it's really illuminating and horrifying.
Yeah.
The restrictions placed on the and the difficulty in simply living a life. If you have to plan on having a doctor's appointment, you might have to go through 3 checkpoints. One of those checkpoints might just be shut down that day, so you have to get there 5 hours ahead of time because you have to build in that time. So your life is just crazy, these restrictions.
Exactly. And even so Jamal Bowman, he actually so I was watching this interview that he did on Democracy Now, and he was talking about how he was quoted as saying that that he understands, or he connects with the Palestinians with the way that the police state has been here, with the protests that have been going on, and even just the police brutality, right? So he can just imagine what it must be like for the people in Palestine who have been living like this for how long, right? And the worst part about it is that in that same interview, he talks about how that he is fully for Biden and pushing for, going to push for a progressive sort of agenda with Biden, when Biden is not for making aid to Israel conditional. He is totally for Israel, backing Israel. And so I feel that, how do you go and you have such a strong stance on Palestine, but then you can so quickly just go and back somebody who is the antithesis of everything that you say?
It's all about a deal making, So like he's going to support Biden now. So when he gets into Congress, then they'll owe him one. I mean, I just think it's just what you do.
Right, but you see how that is, like, the whole thing with AOC was that she was supposed to go in and she was supposed to tear everything up and flip it upside down and all this kind of stuff, right? But then what happened is she rolled over to Nancy Pelosi, right? And so everyone is so excited about these progressive wins, but then he's not even in office. Jamal Bowman isn't even in office, and he's already bending the knee. He's already capitulating.
Right. But I mean, if eventually the idea is that you have enough of these progressives and it's a wave, then they can have some clout. But right now, they're not going to be. They can introduce some legislation, but it's not going to get anywhere.
And there's also a Trump derangement syndrome aspect to this. You cannot not get behind Biden because the implications of Trump and the support you would lose if you're not on board with the game plan,
I mean, don't you think Bowman was directed? Don't you think they just told him, like, okay, you have to come out with a statement supporting Biden now?
Right.
Because if you do this, then we'll give you A, B, and C. And if you don't do it, then you're never going to get anything done. So it's like, well, you just do a 5-minute thing or talk about how you support Biden. That's all.
And there are enough examples, like obviously with Tulsi and Bernie and people like that, that if you do not follow the rule, they can try and destroy you. Basically, there's no limits to what they can do to cheat you or to lie about you.
But I mean, Daisy, you have a good point, because when it's a slippery slope. Once you start compromising, then you say, okay, well, just compromise in this thing, and then it's another thing, and then before you know it, you're like totally in bed with them. And then does that mean, like, if there's a wave and 2 or 4 years and you have all these progressives in Congress, is AOC going to wake up all of a sudden to her progressive roots and say, okay, I'll join you now in voting for real progressive change? Or is she just going to become one of the Nancy Pelosi?
And not just that, but it's also this whole thing of how AOC and Bernie Sanders, they came out and I think it was like some sort of letter or something that they were presenting, that it was supposed to be, because again, this annexation, right, that was being threatened, that they were saying that they were going to make aid to Israel conditional if they went ahead with the annexation, right? But again, if you're going to, then you're just doing these things for show. You know what I'm saying? Like, again, it comes down to you have no teeth, you have no grit. Like, you really don't mean any of these things. You're just doing these things to appease, to make it seem like you actually care and that you actually want to bring about some change. But in actuality, you're just gonna roll over, and again, you're gonna go with people like Biden. You're just gonna do whatever, you know.
Nobody cares. You know, people don't care. I mean, you and I care, and we care about it, but most people, they don't really care about it because it doesn't affect them. You know, they're like, oh yeah, whatever. You know, they hear these stories of repression in the settlements or whatever in the West Bank or whatever. I don't think most people really think about that too much, and I don't think they're too concerned about it because it's not in their backyard.
I would say the former is more true. I don't think that people. I think people are generally good-hearted and all that, and it's not in their face. And that's what it is. That's the reason people.
On the other hand, if some of this Epstein stuff comes out and says, okay, it all of a sudden it becomes in the alternative media, there's some clear evidence that, let's say Mossad was involved with this, and I'm not saying they were, but let's say it comes out, there's some clear evidence that eventually the mainstream media has to deal with it in some way, shape, or form and address that issue, and all of a sudden it becomes part of the awareness. Then I think that could have. Like that could be like, oh, there's a foreign power that's really kind of trying to control our politicians.
I don't know if you anyone that was curious, you know, all their answers were basically there over Russiagate, and they still carry on with it. It doesn't, you know, ability to twist.
You got to remember, it's the spin, right? It's the way that people like to be told stories. They don't want to actually have to, and I don't like making broad generalizations, but I'm going to make a broad generalization here, is that, you know, the people that did buy into, you know, the Russiagate scandal and all this kind of, and then they went into the whole impeachment thing with the Ukraine gate and all that. These are people who, they like their news packaged in this pretty little box, you know what I'm saying? Already digested. That's how they like it. They already like it digested. Here's the information. And then, oh, okay, so now I could just regurgitate this whenever anybody comes to me. And then if anyone gives me some sort of fact that goes against this narrative, then, oh no, then you're a Trump supporter. And then it's the ad hominem attacks because you have nothing to argue, because it's not your argument. You didn't internalize that argument. You just and then you just regurgitated whatever sort of information was fed to you.
Yeah, essentially it was the Rachel Maddow Russiagate story hour every night, you know, basically like, here's this wonderful, exciting tale I'm going to tell you. And I don't even know if people cared if it was reality or not. It was just an exciting little episode every night, you know, of what's going on, you know.
Think about how many people like reality TV. Why is it that people like it? It's because of the drama. They're not watching it because they think it's, you know, like the greatest thing, the greatest sort of acting, and, you know, they don't care about the quality. They just care about the fact that it's consumable. That's it. That it's in this cute little package.
Yeah, and a better analogy might be to, like, you know, pro wrestling, right? You know, they don't care. It doesn't matter that you know, that's a breakaway chair or whatever. Or, you know, it's that the thing's all scripted. It's really entertaining, and so they'll just join right in with. Though luckily Rachel's ratings are plummeting, but she'll probably bounce back on some other crazy thing that comes up.
I couldn't believe her, you know, affected anger, or whether it was real or not. I don't know, but I mean that you know, Russians are paying bounties on our servicemen and women, and like, okay, I mean, so you have 20 people that were killed since 2019 in Afghanistan, 20 service people, which is, you know, a tragedy. But show me some evidence, like. And like, why do you need to pay bounties to the Taliban? They didn't want people in there. They were trying to get rid of the people in their country anyway. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, and there's no credible evidence. Like, show me.
See, and I think the biggest problem is that all of the, and this is something that every single time that they come out with these stories, it's always the same. It comes from anonymous sources.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Anonymous intelligence sources.
Exactly.
Right. You know, Richard Helms is a former head of the CIA, like back in the 70s, said that we'll know. I believe it was him. It said we'll know we have done our job when the American population, believes the lies, but doesn't know they're not being told the truth. Like they just believe it and they've been totally brainwashed. I mean, that basically is kind of, it's sad, but people don't really look beyond the surface. They want the entertainment value. They want the story to tell. But there's not a lot of depth there. I remember being in the Soviet Union in the 70s or the 80s, and like some old woman come up to me in the subway because she knew I was American and started yelling at me about Afghanistan. What are the Americans doing in Afghanistan? And she was regurgitating what she had read in Pravda or Izvestia. And it's just like, it's not that different.
Mm-hmm.
It's more polished and more sophisticated and maybe more entertaining, but it's not all that different. Unfortunately,
Right.
it's kind of sad.
It is.
All right. And on that happy note.
On that happy note. All right.
Woo.
All right.
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine.
Good one. I like it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye, folks.
Take care.